flying high, I reflected on the number of different projects that I've embarked upon this year, and now in particular the new techniques, both software and hardware related, that I've been adding to my personal toolkit. But one thing I've not touched upon in any detail recently has been my ongoing move from Nikon to Fuji. Now, I've gone a long way down the path. I've reduced the amount of Nikon gear I have, and I've purchased further Fuji products. But I haven't as yet taken that last step and gone mirrorless. Taken that last step and gone mirrorless. And now that sounds dramatic, and in a sense it is. Without a salary coming every month, then the opportunities for me to buy a new kit are of necessity limited. Now I'm happy with that. I mean, the alternative would be to return to being a wage slave, and at my age that's not a pleasant prospect. The reality though is that if I want to purchase the remaining items to provide me with a full Fuji kit, I will need to sell the Nikons, and there will be little realistic chance of being able to purchase them back again if I change my mind, at least in the near to medium future. Now I appreciate it's a first world problem, but for me it's kind of a big deal. Now if you consider that only 2 weeks ago I was sitting here processing images from 2015, and I was wondering if I'd done the right thing in selling my Nikon D800E. Well, that I think tells you that I'm probably not there yet, and I also had a long conversation on this very subject with a fellow Nikon stroke Fuji photographer last night. He took 3 years from purchasing his first Fuji camera to selling his full frame Nikons. However, even now he's still got a top quality crop sensor Nikon DSLR, and that is his go-to for natural history and wildlife subjects. Now, it tells me he's been trying the Fuji X-T2 for wildlife, but in his words the jury is still out on that one. The telling comment for me though came about 10 minutes later when he mentioned he was looking to upgrade his current crop sensor Nikon DSLR for a newer model. I think that perhaps tells us what we need to know about the practicalities of going fully mirrorless if wildlife photography is a serious part of your output. Now, unlike Richard, I am not a regular wildlife photographer. He is, and he's excellent at it. But I do like to dabble. And plus, of course, the longer lens does have uses for landscape work. Now, the longest lens I've used on the Fujis is the 55-200 kit lens. Now, it's okay, it's nothing stellar, but used carefully, it's perfectly adequate for landscape work. For the number of times I actively seek out wildlife subjects, it simply isn't really appropriate for me to splash the cash and buy the Fuji 100-400 zoom, for example. For my purpose, that falls very neatly into the nice to have category. So looking over the last 12 months, the majority of my photography has been with one of the Fuji bodies. Now on the surface, that's a clear indication that perhaps the time is right to move over fully. But now, harking back to my working days, further analysis of the data reveals something more fundamental. Now, if we ignore the occasional wildlife photography, then broadly speaking my camera usage is actually fairly genre specific. So for example, for travel I use the Fujis. For street I mainly use the Fuji X100T, and just recently for landscapes I've been almost exclusively using the Fuji. However, things like macro and insect photography I use a crop sensor Nikon with a Sigma macro lens, and astrophotography, which I'm just starting to dabble with, I've been using the Nikon D750 with a 14-24 f2.8 lens. So they still have a place, and those are two subjects where, to my mind, Fuji haven't yet come up with a better option. Video, time-lapse, I use the Fujis for those, specifically the X-T20, which is superb at both for my needs. Urban, again, that's mainly the Fuji and mainly the X100T. And if I'm just pottering about well, and I carry that Fuji with me everywhere, so, you know, I wouldn't use anything else. The only genre where there's no clear split is portraiture. I don't do a huge amount, and when I do, it tends to be whatever camera's handy. So, to me, the conclusion is actually fairly clear. For most of my photography, the Fuji system gives me everything I need. However, like my friend Richard, there are a few specific subjects where I rely on the Nikon kit, given the choice. I say given the choice because I don't carry both sets of kit unless I know that I will need them both. Now, like many others, I still feel that whilst the Fuji system can be everything to some photographers, those of us who are more generalised or indeed wildlife or sports focused are still not fully catered for, specifically in terms of long telephoto lenses and of course macro. So for the time being at least, I think I will be staying as I am, using Nikon kit alongside the Fuji. Now on the one hand it does feel like a cop-out. Is it a mere pandering to an irrational emotional attachment to some lumps of glass and metal? I don't know. But on balance, I think the bottom line is that whilst for some purposes it is a complete system, Fuji hasn't quite got there in terms of a full kit for the enthusiast photographer. The photographer, that is, who does a little bit of everything. Now I've tried using my 105mm Nikon Fit macro lens on a Fuji body with an adapter and it works, but it's unwieldy and small bodies really do need small lenses, I think. And likewise I've attached my trusty old 300mm f4 Nikon made of metal to the Fuji bodies, and unless it's on a tripod it's just not an easy combination to hold steady in my experience, but that might just be my age. So for anyone who's been following my Fuji journey, this brings the story up to date. I'm still anticipating going fully mirrorless at some stage. However, as I can still carry the bigger, heavier kit, and it does still have some advantage photographically, then that date is still somewhere in the future. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.